Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moblin coming at you with another APUSH video. Today we're taking a look at topic 8.4, focusing in on the U.S. economy after World War II and extending through most of the second half of the 20th century. Now, with the close of World War II, there's going to be some major changes and with it some challenges that are going to be defining the period economically. Now, that being said, there's also going to be great opportunity that did not exist before the war. So let's kind of dig into what's going to be happening. First thing, in 1946, we're going to see the creation of what's known as the Employment Act. And through the creation of the Council of Economic Advisors, this is now legislation and in addition to the bureaucracy to help kind of implement what is now not just something that is a mindset or a value of the American people because of the New Deal, but now it's law. The Employment Act now says that the federal government has a responsibility per the law to engage in policies to actively try to maximize employment. And so, whereas previous presidents, of the 19th century, could kind of let the business world take care of itself. If it's up, if it's down, that was independent of the White House and independent of the federal government. Now that has clearly changed. And with that being said, this is going to be happening when the federal government is going to be taking active steps to help Americans that were veterans of the last World War to be able to help promote economic stability in the United States. And one of these examples that is still in existence today and is really now to this point, has aided tens of millions of Americans is the GI Bill. From World War II itself, approximately 7 million people are going to be helped. So what does the GI Bill do? Well, the GI Bill is going to provide needed funding for those returning veterans that want to be able to get a college education or an education in a trade school, something along those lines. This is significant because we are already starting to see now at the end of World War II an important transition in the U.S. economy. We're starting to see the very, very beginning of America's economy transition away from manufacturing, kind of moving away from blue-collar work to more white-collar, service-based work. And that kind of work generally requires more technical training, collegiate education, if you will. And historically, the reason why people did not go to college was not because people weren't talented enough, but it was because they couldn't afford it. And now with an ever-growing demand for people with this kind of an educational background, the federal government is going to step in and bridge that gap and provide the financial means for people to achieve their dreams to get a college education. Millions upon millions of Americans after World War II will get college degrees that otherwise would not have gotten them if not for the GI Bill. But the GI Bill is not just providing, funding for education, but also providing opportunities for people to buy their first homes and start their first businesses. We know that government intervention can kind of warm up the economy by providing low-interest loans, and that's what we're going to be seeing happening. Many Americans that, are going to be, taking advantage of the GI Bill to provide for college education will also take advantage to buy their first homes. And note, once again, because of the low interest rate, this is going to provide an opportunity that would not otherwise exist. So you are seeing clearly that there is an opportunity with the GI Bill in terms of education and housing and business that just simply would not have existed otherwise. Now, even though there's going to be new opportunities because of the GI Bill, there will be some noticeable problems associated with it. And that biggest problem for sure is going to be racial discrimination associated with this bill and applying it to African Americans. African Americans are not going to be able to use that money to go to certain schools that, would deny Black Americans to get an education. So, for example, if you lived in the South and you're trying to get a GI Bill money to go to the University of Alabama, well, the University of Alabama didn't accept African American students, so you were locked out. Furthermore, you saw many applicants for the home loans either be rejected or would only provide the loans for homes that would be in what we call red line districts. In other words, segregated districts within cities of low value homes so as to keep away from white folks living in higher value homes. So there was a lot that was discriminatory in the usage of the GI Bill. Now, with more people getting, better education and therefore better jobs and better housing, it's not going to be a surprise that we're going to see an explosion in the birth rate after World War II, commonly referred to today as the baby boom. Now, this is, going to be just absolutely transformative for American society. This will be the largest generation in American history up to this point. And as this record number of children are being born, you're going to be seeing this generation be able to transform what, daycares are like, actually even before that, what hospitals are like, what daycares are like, what schools are like, what colleges are like. And still to this day, having a major effect, for example, on, Social Security policy, in healthcare. So the baby boom generation is going to be significant. And even though, women of this time period are going to be having about 2.5 kids, statistically speaking, which is way lower than, other generations of American history, what has changed dramatically by the end of World War II is that child-infant mortality is in steep decline. Prior to World War II, it was very common if somebody had, 5, 6 children, that one of those children did not make it to adulthood. Well, now it's really, really rare to see that happen. Now, with better jobs due to better education and bigger families, and with a lot of help from the GI Bill, we're going to be seeing an explosion in the number of people moving into suburban communities. And, think about, what this means. You see this, very stereotypical suburban family in the late 40s, early 50s. This shows what we are now starting to define as the American dream. The idea of a home of your own, on your own little piece of grass, your own little piece of land, with a fenced-in backyard. Maybe you got a dog, maybe you got a cat, you got a car. You are living what was really, a dream compared to how you probably grew up, because you're talking about, folks that are in their 30s now by the 1950s. These are folks that were, growing up during the Great Depression when they had nothing, relatively speaking. And these were folks that saw tremendous, violence and destruction, those that were veterans of World War II. So to be able to now have this post-war, lifestyle that is going to be centered on, this quiet, tranquil life with prosperity and opportunity, this was, pretty amazing in terms of America's history. And know, once again, what's going to be allowing this to happen: a lot of government intervention. We already talked about the impact of the GI Bill, but remember, the FHA program, which was started by Rose in the New Deal, is also still in existence, providing people that weren't necessarily veterans of World War II the opportunity to be able to buy a home of their own. And this idea of a home of your own in the suburbs is now starting to define what it means to be middle class in America, which is something we'd never seen before. To be middle class previously meant that you lived in an urban setting, you lived in an apartment probably, you worked in a factory perhaps. Now you're living in the suburbs with a home of your own, maybe working in an office somewhere now. And so we're redefining what middle class means. We're redefining, what the American dream looks like. And one of the things that's going to start to define American suburban life is the impact of a man by the name of William Levitt. Now, Levitt is going to get his, start in building barracks during the war, and he was able to develop mass-produced housing. So in other words, dwellings that were built on a factory basis. And he's then going to apply that to suburban living after World War II. In many respects, what Henry Ford was for the automobile industry, William Levitt is going to be for suburban housing. And some of these communities that he will create will actually bear his name, like this one right here in Levittown, New Jersey. And when we talk about Levittown homes were basic homes, kind of like a Model T was a basic car. They were relatively small. They were usually 2 to 3 bedroom houses, usually about 1,000 square feet, and they were built in communities on a factory basis. So as this aerial picture kind of shows you, if you lived in a Levittown community, which was similar to many other suburban communities, you had these cookie cutter houses where they were all made the same way, the same floor plan. The only thing that might be different is the outside exterior paint. And note, this kind of, conveyor belt assembly line, middle class, lifestyle is going to be emerging from that. And when you look at these images and you factor in some other things that are going to be developing in American culture in the post-war era through the early 1960s, you're going to see that one of the prevailing dominant values of, say, the 1950s will be conformity. From the cars we drive to the suits we wear to the neighborhoods we live in, conformity, not standing out, being like everybody else, will be an important cultural value. And you see it just in one way. We see one example of it through these suburban, if not Levittown, communities. Now, once again, though, you got to be aware of the downside of this. Once again, a lot of these suburban homes were only available to white families. Generally, realtors did not sell suburban homes to black Americans based on the assumption that if black Americans lived in a suburban neighborhood, then the value of the homes would go down. Once again, signifying the racist attitudes that many had during that time period. And note, if whites are going to be able to have more access to the GI Bill and more access to FHA loans and more guidance from realtors, more and more whites are going to be leaving urban areas for the suburbs. And those that will be left behind will have far less money and will be less likely to be white. And so we start to see this transformation of urban areas, which were a real mix of people racially, now becoming overwhelmingly people of color. And we are seeing wealth and taxpayer dollars leaving the cities, which is going to set many of these urban areas on the path to urban blight, urban decay, which is going to be a challenge when we get into the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, some other things are going to be transformative. We talked previously during World War II about how the Sun Belt was beginning to emerge as an important region of America for new job opportunity. And that will only grow and expand in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. More and more jobs in the computer industry that will be emerging. Jobs in the entertainment industry that will be emerging. Jobs in the tech and space industries that will be emerging. These are mostly going to be in Sun Belt states. So we're seeing significant growth in places like Florida, Texas, and California. Additionally, be aware of some of the challenges economically associated with the post-war period. One, at least in the very short term, will be inflation. Remember, when the war is going on, the government's buying a lot of, products. And the economy, to some degree, is heating and heating and heating and heating. And even though the government tries to make attempts to limit that, when the war is over, inflation is going to be surging. So that will be a problem in the very, very short term for the first maybe year and a half after the war ends. And with the transitioning of veterans back home, many of them looking for their old factory jobs and demand for products down because the war is over, that's going to lead to some challenges in factories. An attempt by business owners to reduce pay and benefits, which will then lead to a massive outbreak of strikes in 1946 and 1947. We even see President Truman seize the coal mines in an attempt to stop a strike instigated by the United Mine Workers. So, new opportunities, challenges, key transformations beginning to happen in America's economy after World War II ends. We'll see you next time.